What's going on, guys? So behind me I've got this Dodge Dakota Scat Pack Swap 392 6.4 3rd gen Hemi, whatever you want to call it, but behind us we have it and we've been getting underway on this project. So if you guys are just stopping by, the 392 is in here. We're just doing a bunch of wiring, and if it looks chaotic it's because it is. Right now I'm just wiring in some stuff underneath the fuse box so it can all look as factory once we're finished. We've got our new radiator in here. I just wired up the radiator. It's going to run through the factory fan wiring. Since this was a newer one, it did come with an electric fan, and it does have a factory relay here. So we're going to plumb in our Holley to turn on that relay to turn on our fan, and that way we're not having a bunch of extra janky wiring all over the place. So I've got the relay for the fan there. I've got our trigger wire from our Holley, just kind of mapping some stuff out. And then I also have our fuel pump wiring. We're gonna use a factory relay, but we're gonna be running it through a beefed up wire all the way back. We got a 12 gauge wire so that it has sufficient current for our Holley drop-in fuel pump. And then what I'm doing right now just is I got a bunch of the wiring all buttoned up, cleaned up. We've got our center console from the Challenger here, so we kind of got that. I got to make some brackets for that, but it's in place, and you can see I have everything turned on right now. And our shifter's lit up, ready to go for our 8-speed. And I just plugged in this little touchscreen. We're ultimately not going to use this touchscreen since we got this huge one here, but I do want to at least use the wizard on the Terminator X. That way we have a base map that we can at least get things working with, and we'll go from there. All right, so we're getting a lot closer with everything, you guys, but I'm going to show you guys a few things here. If you guys haven't seen how we got to this point, lowering the truck, getting a lot of the stuff configured, changing the rear axle out, we are getting closer to being able to start getting into the fun stuff, in my opinion. But let me show you guys what we got going on right now. Okay, so I'm going to go into the wizard. We're going to go to the wizard over here. So fuel injection, go to Gen 3 Hemi. And we're just going to go through all the itemized things, you guys. So just go ahead and it's going to step you through everything, ask you what displacement your Gen 3 Hemi is, and all the details on your engine. And I'm just going to run through this whole thing and I'll show you guys the end result. Okay, so it's making our new file and it's uploading it to our Terminator X. And there we go, just tells us to cycle to ignition, and now we've got our wizard file in there. All right, so just working on some more stuff. So right here is our positive wire that runs all the way back to our fuel pump. So this is our 12 gauge wire going to our fuel pump. So I just buttoned that up so that we can bring that, just kind of roughed it in so we have the correct length. And I'm gonna bring it up into our fuse box. And then I also was over here just double checking and kind of just catching up on whoever was previously working on this. So, and the Holley requires a certain sensor for the crank trigger. So I just checked it and it's still the original one from the Scat Pack. So we're gonna have to swap that out. I'll show you guys. It's over here on the bench. So this is the one I just popped out. This is the one that we can't use with the Holley. So I'll show you guys that in the Holley instructions in just a second, but we got to order the correct one. So here's what I was mentioning here. So the Holley Gen 3 Hemi harness, it shows that one right there. And that's the style we have there. This little tapered version. So we got to get that one. Okay, so we got a little bit more done, you guys. Ended up soldering and heat shrinking our wires for our fan. So that will plug in down there. And apparently I dropped some of my connectors, so I got to pick those up. Everything's just kind of crazy right now because it's just all over the place while we get organized with the wires. Did a bunch more wiring under the fuse box. I'm gonna have to button that stuff up. I'm just kind of in test mode and kind of just roughing things in. What I probably can do is, I'm pretty sure I should be able to put some clamps on my heater hoses. I gotta put these shieldings back over top of them, put the clamps on there, and then I think I can sneak my intake back in here. Once I get the intake back in here, I can plug everything back in, and we can size up our fuel line, which is hanging out somewhere in all of this madness right here. And I can actually cut the fuel line to length. We can actually maybe turn this thing on and get the fuel pump to prime, flush out the line. Yeah, we're getting closer to getting this thing hopefully fired. All right, so a little more organizing of wires. So there is additional wires on this in case you want to run a cable setup. So there's one for the TPS and also your IAC. So I bundled that up over there. And then we've got our drive-by-wire cable here. And I did notice that we don't have the additional harness for our VVT. So I'm gonna have to order that, and that's gonna plug in to here. So it essentially runs over to here to activate our variable valve timing, but we don't have that harness that plugs into the back. So I'm hoping I can kind of put it back in afterwards. And also it does run our SRV, so our active runners in the intake manifold. So that one harness runs both of those, and we don't have that right now, so I'm gonna have to get that on order. But let me go ahead and get the intake in here, because then I can go ahead and I can measure my fuel line and get a little bit more stuff situated and taken care of, and we can continue to just kind of tidy things up and get things organized. Okay, so the intake is back in place. Our fuel line is right here. So we've got a 90-8 from Mr. Gasket, and we have right here the Earl's adapter. So this is the quick fit adapter. Also, I chose to get the one with the 1.8 NPT port, so we can put a electronic fuel pressure sensor on there, and it'll actually plug right into the Holley harness right here and show up on our dash. So figure it might as well be a nice little feature as well. So that'll go right there. We can put our 90, and then I can figure out where we got to cut this so that it can go back there and have a nice length on it. Okay, so here we go. We've got our line made up, so that's all good, but I don't want to put this on just yet, and I don't even have this fully clicked in because I'm going to be ordering that fuel pressure sensor. But I'm going to take this off, and we can potentially try to key this thing on and see. It might be super unhappy because a lot of stuff is just disconnected right now. I had to order a bunch of different stuff. I had to order a oil pressure sensor, like I said, the crank trigger, I had to order that sensor, and we're also missing the SRV stuff, but we'll see if it'll at least try to hit the fuel pump. I think, like I said, with that stuff all missing, it might not be too happy. Also, we have our wideband O2 sensor plugged in, but we don't have an exhaust to put it into anything yet. And just a lot of little things that I got to button up, but we're getting closer. So let's go ahead and I'll try to put this into some sort of cup or something, just in case it decides to push some fuel out, because I want to run fuel through that, clean out any of the junk that's in that line, and then we can actually connect it if we wanted. All right, so we got it into that thing of coconut water there, just a little container to catch it. Let's see if we get any action here. I think we might also have to do a learn on the pedal. It might not be priming for that reason. Let's see. Oh, I think I hear it, maybe. No, nothing yet. I didn't hear anything prime. Let's try doing a pedal learn, because I know it wants to do a TPS auto set on there, so let's try that. So here's this, perform a TPS auto set. Launch control, no, that's not what we want. Okay, so I'm gonna hit the key right here, and you're gonna see that test light come on. This is our positive trigger wire from our Holley. See how the test light comes on? So that is telling our relay to kick on. So I want to make sure that comes on and it times out, as it does. So now I can go ahead and reinstall the relay, and it should kick on our fuel pump once we cycle the key. So let's see if we get fuel priming through the system for the first time. Hopefully that relay kicks on. Let's hit the key. Yeah, there she is. I'm sure you guys probably heard that swishing. That was the first time the new fuel system's priming. We were getting closer, guys. Exciting stuff. So I want to flush this through a few times, so I'll probably do that. Any junk that's in the line can get flushed out. That's nasty gas for sure. But yeah, we'll do this a few times, flush it out, and then we can install our line. That'll be ready to go. Okay, so what I'm working on right now is I actually updated the Terminator X Max to the latest software or firmware, and now I actually have to update the screen. So I've got the supplied USB stick here. I went on Holley.com, downloaded that, and now I'm gonna plug it in to the USB connection that we put down here. It comes with a cable, so you can have a remote connection so you don't have to take off your dash every time. So I've got that down there. I'm gonna plug this in, then we can go to the screen and we can hopefully update it. Also under here, I've got our fuel line connected now to the rail. So our fuel rail is actually pressurized, and it's actually the next day, so I'm gonna re-energize everything. I've just been keeping it off overnight since we're just still in a bunch of a test phase. Okay, so take our USB, gonna plug it in here, and then we can go up here. We'll key this thing on. I don't know if you guys can hear the fuel pump. It primes now. And then you'll see here, firmware update required is what it's saying. So I'm gonna go over here. We're gonna go to menu. We're gonna go to configuration, update firmware. Push OK to start the updates. Please leave the power on. Returns the dashboard screen. So there you go. So now it's updating all by itself. It's pretty simple, you guys. So there's our progress. All right, that took all of not even a minute to do, and now she is back up. So that's pretty cool. Really doesn't take much. So now everything's here. Obviously everything is kind of saying error because it's very low right now and half the sensors aren't even plugged in, but you can see there she is good to go now. We don't have the little error in the corner. So our voltage, oil pressure, obviously it's gonna say nothing. I don't have that plugged in. Cool. I don't have that. I don't have a lot of the stuff plugged in, but all this stuff is gonna start to populate as we plug more sensors in and get things hooked up. All right, so another thing I want to start contending with is getting our radiator hoses figured out. So I want to get this over here. I gotta attach this one here one way or another. This radiator on this year of Dakota, you can see it doesn't have a fill neck, so that's why it has this like remote fill neck on the actual hose. So I'll see what I can do there, and then this one I have to get going down to here. So not too far to go, but just gotta find the right bends and length of hose, and let me see what I come up with. Okay, so I've just been messing with various hoses, trying to figure out the combination that's ultimately gonna be for there. So I got some couplings and some different hoses showing out some different bends so that we can get from A to B. But I want to take off this. This is for the reservoir. It's essentially a bleed for the reservoir, but in this case we're not going to run a reservoir. We're just going to have an overflow tank coming from our radiator cap. But I had to find a really weird size. So this was a 7/16 was the correct size, and for some reason in most Allen or Hex kits they don't come with a 7/16 or an 11. So let me remove this spout so we can go ahead and put a plug in here instead. Okay, so this spout is out, and then we've got our handy Earl's fittings. So let's go ahead and put this billet aluminum plug in there. Super nice anodized. We'll get it in so it's plugged up. Okay, so there we go. We've got our plug in there all set, and then some parts from Holley arrived. So we ended up getting a bunch of different stuff. We got the input output accessory pins. So these are auxiliary pins, so we can plumb in stuff like our fuel gauge. There's a ton of wire and all these specific pins, the Holley Terminator system. So we'll get that so we can get our fuel gauge working. Also, we ended up ordering this as well. So this is going to be our USB cable because we need to be able to program this thing. So here's the USB cable so we can hook up with a laptop to it, get a little more specific and custom on our programming. Also had to order this here. So here is our fuel pressure sensor. So we'll screw this in, and then this will plug directly into the Holley like I was mentioning. So they do supply the pigtail if you need it, but our Terminator X already has that pigtail on it. So this will be as easy as just screwing this in and then plugging that into our Holley, and it'll give us live fuel pressure, which is good. And then here's the harness that I was saying we were missing. So Gen 3 HEMI and VVT. So here we go. So this will plug into our Holley, and then on the other side, this is going to activate our VVT. This is going to activate our VVT. What the hell is with this fly? This is going to activate our VVT, and then this will go to our SRV. So this will control our active runners. So definitely crucial to have this harness. All right, so we got our sensor here. So it's plugged into the Holley, and I went ahead and flushed out the line too. I took it off the rail, flushed it out just in case any of our sealant on there made its way into the fuel line. So anyways, that's flushed out. So now I haven't primed it yet, but if we go ahead and prime it, we should see fuel pressure on our gauge. We'll let this thing boot up, and should be somewhere on here. I gotta find it. There we go. Fuel pressure 56, 55. So if I cycle it one more time, let it prime up. Hopefully you guys can see that. There you go, 56 PSI. So we're good there. We've got a lot more other stuff to get working, but we've got fuel pressure and we got it reading. All right, so I'm still messing with stuff, still in testing phase. I ended up popping the intake manifold back off, and I and went ahead and plugged in our harness. So we've got the SRV one plugged in and all that, and it's plugged into the back here. So we plugged that in so that our active runners now have the pigtail going into the Holley. So that's all good. And then I also connected it down so that our VVT is now connected. So that stuff is done, and then I've just been doing a bunch of other testing and wiring. So a few things. I had to get our neutral safety switch wired up because obviously we don't have the original transmission that was once in this Dakota. So I had to wire that up and find all those wires. The other thing I'm wiring up is our reverse. So we need our reverse signal coming from our transmission to come into the fuse box and illuminate our reverse lights. So they were controlled a really different and weird way from the factory versus what we're doing now. So I'm just doing some testing, and then I'm gonna end up putting a relay to kick on the reverse lights, whereas before they came out of the factory computer, but I'm not gonna come out of the factory computer, obviously, it's no longer here. So having to do that, put it to a relay so that it kicks the 2 reverse lights on when the 8-speed is in reverse. So I'm doing that, and then I have a bunch of other stuff. I'm still waiting for my hoses and stuff to show up so that I can get the radiator hoses. I've got our billet couplings here, so got that stuff. And then I also have this, which I want to get routed since I have the intake off, because this is going to run through the back. So right here, this is our Holley harness for alternators. So this is our 1-wire alternator, but this needs 12 volts for when the engine's running so that it can tell the alternator to kick on. So they give us tons of wire here, but let me go ahead, get this out, get this routed, and a bunch of other stuff. And hopefully I'll be able to button this stuff up and get a little bit further here. Okay, check it out, you guys. I got some test wiring here before I solder and heat shrink this, but I ended up bringing that into the cab here so we don't have to pass more wires, using factory wiring to get back into here. And if I take this and I ground this out, which is what we got to do for our 8-speed. So if I put this as chassis ground, you'll see our reverse wires will come on now. So boom, hopefully you guys can see that. See that reflection there? Reverse wires come on. And you can probably hear the click, maybe even. Little relay click. And that's our reverse lights. So that's all done. Let's get some solder, heat shrink, and start cleaning some of this crazy test madness up. Okay, so a bunch of time later, and still have a lot of stuff in testing phases or stages. I gotta still put the bottom of the cover. There's a cover that goes on the bottom of the fuse box, and button up a lot of that, but at least I got most of the stuff working that I wanted to get working. I also put the intake manifold back in, tighten it down. Still some dressing in of the wires. A lot of these I gotta kind of dress them into length, so that's kind of why some of this stuff is crossing over. You guys all know that I'll end up dressing this in so it'll look perfectly neat and tidy. This has to go to our intake arm, so it looks like I might actually have to extend this one because it's almost like it fits over here but not over there. And these are to length for our cam sensor and our oil pressure sensor, so that one might have to either get an extension harness or extend it myself because it's gonna have to go into the intake air temperature sensor. And then this one, I think I mentioned to you guys, it was the wrong plug. So this has a smaller plug on the oil pressure sensor. So I have this one, which is the correct plug for our oil pressure sensor, which will plug right into here, but I gotta change it. So let me swap that out, and I got some other stuff too, so let's start getting some of the stuff buttoned out. Let me swap in this style sensor. All right, and this is what I was talking about. So this sensor, it's got a much smaller plug, and this is the style that we need for the Holley. This bigger style plug. All right, so you probably can't see it, but the sensor is down in there, and our wire is attached. So also I got the correct length, or hopefully the correct length belt, so let's go ahead and try that out and put that on there. All right, well, if you guys have ever measured for custom belts, it can be a little bit fun. You can use the string method. I chose to use the belt that was suggested, but wasn't the right size, so I'm gonna have to order another belt, unfortunately, but still waiting on all of our couplings and hoses to show up too, so we're not too delayed at the moment, but let's but I'm gonna go ahead and get that belt on order so that we have the correct one. Okay, so we're inside the vehicle. Right now I'm going to wire up our fuel gauge. So with our accessory pins from Holley, we're gonna take this, and then if you look at the instructions, I don't know if this will zoom in or focus, but anyways, on here it shows you all the pins that are on the back of this Pro Dash. And then if you look here, this last column says fuel level, and there's an X next to it. Follow that over, that is pin 21. So I'm gonna plumb in to 21 on the back. I got the connector out here, so I'm gonna put that into pin 21. This is gonna go to our float on our tank, and then hopefully once we do some configuration here, we should have a fuel gauge. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we got our wire connected here to our fuel gauge in our tank. Now I'm gonna go ahead, we'll power this thing up and we'll go into the configuration. It might be a ton of glare, but we're gonna go ahead and get this set up here so we can have a fuel gauge. All right, let me hit the lights for a second so you guys can see. So I ended up adding the fuel gauge right here. You can add it separately on each and every one of these, but I just want to make sure it's working for now. So just chose this one for now since it kind of has just about everything here. So fuel gauge 100, and I just unplugged it just to double check our work. So as soon as I plug this in, it immediately starts reading. So you can see here, fuel gauge is dropping. This thing has probably almost half tank in it, give or take, just a little bit under. So right there, 41%. So you can change, you know, the units or whatever, but I've got it there. We could probably get rid of it using the number if we wanted to and just leave 0 to 100. But anyways, we've got a fuel gauge now, which is important. So this thing's got a ton of old fuel in it, but at least it's working. Okay, I found this screen. I kind of like it better. I'm gonna put at the bottom, so anything below 25% fuel, that it'll show red on the gauge. Enable low warning, steady warning color. Flash rate slow. That'd be kind of cool. So it'll look like this. It kind of shows you the test. So as it goes low, let's see. Hopefully it shows us how this works. So you can change all that, and you can change your units, all kinds of stuff. Pretty cool. Okay, so I cleaned it up. I think I like that. So you can see here. Oh. So you can see here, it's got 0 to 100. It doesn't show a number. You can change it so it says a number, but I think it looks better without it. And then if it gets below 25% or 25% and below, it's going to turn red and start flashing, so it can tell you that you're almost out of fuel. So, and we can change a bunch of stuff. There's like nitrous pressure and stuff, which I don't think we're gonna be getting into on this thing, but I kind of like this look. I'm sure it's gonna look even cooler once it starts up and we can see the RPM going through here. All right, so the fuel gauge is set and some of the coupling started showing up, so I'm gonna try and get some of this situated. So I got my silicone hose there, and I've got it on the bottom of the water pump there. So I'm gonna come out here, and then I have to come up towards here to make it there. So I got a few of these, let's see what we can make happen. All right, so really happy with the way this came out, you guys. If I can give you guys a bit more light. So it comes nicely through here, does this 90, transfers into that 90, and then tons of room through here. We've got at least like an inch, might look close right there on the belt, but promise it isn't. No close or further away than factory. So plenty of clearance there, but fits nice and looks super, super clean the way that all goes through there. What I'm trying to, I guess, come to terms with is how I want to do this top one here. Reason is because, like I said, this does have the radiator cap mounted on the hose, so there's no neck on here. I don't know, I almost maybe could order the older style, like the older style Dakota radiator where it has the neck on here, but I think it's going to sit a lot closer to everything, so I think I'll probably just end up keeping this one. But trying to make this somewhat appealing or move that so that it doesn't look so funny, but that's what I'm dealing with right now. The other thing too is it goes from the larger size, like this is 1 3/4, and it actually steps down to 1 1/2 for whatever reason, so it pinches down to 1 1/2 on the factory radiator, and this is the factory size. Even though it's an aftermarket radiator, it is 1 1/2. I'm gonna keep messing with it, see what I can come up with. I'm sure I'll come up with some sort of idea or solution here, but right now just trying to figure it out. And I did, just until the new belt shows up, I just put a zip tie around it so that I can see the proper path, and that's how I made sure I had the correct clearance without actually having the correct belt until that one arrives. So let me mess with this and I'll update you guys once I got this sorted out. All right, we've got the 2250, so let's see if this guy fits on there. Just a little bit short, you guys, so it's the one that was spec'd out, but she's a little short. My guess is because this has the Holley power steering pump, and in the instructions for this alternator, it had the factory power steering pump, which is a smaller diameter pulley on the power steering pump. But anyways, let's get a little bit longer. Okay, so we've got our belt on order, but we're not going to put that on because at the same time we don't have all of our clamps on, so that way it's not going to turn our water pump. We still have to fill it up with power steering fluid, but we're literally just going to fire this thing up for, you know, maybe 5 seconds and shut it back down. That's about it. So just so we can kind of get some action out of it. It still needs, you know, the exhaust and everything else built, so it's not like we're going to be running it for any length of time, but kind of at least just to get things at least sorted. What I do have to do now though is put it back up in the air, change out our crank position sensor, so our pickup there, the one that I was showing you guys I think earlier in this video. So I gotta replace that. I also have to put the oil filter on, and then we also have to fill it up with oil. So let's put it up, do the stuff from the bottom, and then we can put it back down, fill it up with fluids, and maybe crank this thing. Okay, so we're under here and we just installed the new crank sensor right there. And then over here, this was the area I was telling you somebody has just left jagged raw bare metal sitting there. So I want to clean that up, maybe just put a little bit of paint on it, and then I can install my oil filter right up in there as well. All right, there we go. So clean up that nasty edge, smooth it all out, and just give it a light dusting on there, at least so that that part's not rusting. It's kind of a shame that we can't make the rest of it look as nice as this. We as you guys remember, if you guys have been watching the series, we ended up painting the back half of the frame so it looks all shiny like that, but in here there's just way too much going on, and if we do pull the engine, we'll end up cleaning up the whole frame and making it look all fresh again. But anyways, let me go ahead and get my filter in there. Okay, we got our MOPAR filter. Let's go ahead, screw this on, and then we can put this thing back down. Okay, so we got some synthetic oil. I like running this stuff, you guys. This is the race version of Mobil 1, so it actually has more zinc and more additives in it than your regular synthetic would. So I run this in my Hellcats, my Vipers, all kinds of stuff. So I'm gonna put this in here, get some oil in it, and then we'll see what happens. All right, so we've got oil in the engine, and now what I just did was I unplugged all the coil packs just so that this thing doesn't fire up if it wants to right away. I kind of want to, since it didn't have any oil in it for, I don't even know how long at this point, but kind of want to prime the system a little bit, get the oil pressure up. So I think now what should happen is this thing should crank when we hit the key. So let's see what happens here, boys. All right, so let's get in here. You guys can hear the fuel pump priming. Our Holley's booting up. Let's see. So timing 15 degrees. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see if she will crank. Ooh, that's definitely a fast crank. So okay, so we got oil in it, everything is connected. Moment of truth. Gauge powers up, fuel pump primes. PSI of oil pressure. Guys, so there you have it. I'm super excited, super happy. I promised you guys at the beginning of this that we would get this thing at least fired up, and we did accomplish that. So it fired up, and we didn't run it for any length of time. Like I said, just cranked it, fired it, ran it for a couple seconds, and then shut it back off because we still have to get a bunch of other stuff plumbed in there, but we are well on our way. So a bunch of parts are still on their way. So we still have to do the exhaust system on this. We gotta wait for the drive shaft to show up. We gotta do the brakes, and we have to get the accessory belt on there, as well as get the fluids in there and all that. But at least most of the wiring is situated so that this thing can key on and crank. And I also gotta do a lot of other stuff. There's gonna be a continuous list of stuff on this, you guys. We still gotta get the interior in there. We gotta make some brackets for the center console, mount the center console in there, and a bunch of other stuff. But if you guys are enjoying this content, make sure you give it a thumbs up, share it with any friends or anywhere you guys think anybody else would enjoy this content. And we got lots more on the way for you guys. As always, don't forget, if you want to check out our Hellcat build, we've got this Challenger Hellcat that we've been rebuilding. Also got the Dodge Dakota Hellcat, and we got the Hellcat Swap Ram. A little bit of everything on this channel and a lot more on the way, so hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next video.